What's going on, everyone? This is James Grandmaster Facts Boyce, and you're here for another episode of the Facts Project. Today, two very special guests. We have Kenny Porter and Tyrell Kennan. We are here to talk about Operation Iron Coffin for IDW Publishing, IDW Dark imprint as well. So thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, happy to do it.
I'm happy to do it as well. There's been a lot of anticipation about this book, and I'm glad that I got a chance to read this beforehand, actually as far back as a week ago. And I have a ton of questions about this book. So for one, IDW has been building a real distinct horror identity. What made this project a fit for that imprint?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So Tyrell and I had worked on the pitch together, and our editor Dave, he was my editor over at DC for a while. I did like DC Mech with him and a bunch of Batman shorts. We had a great time working together, and he had gone over to IDW to do some freelance editing and told me that they were looking for new horror books.
Yeah.
I was like, listen, if you liked The Schlub, which Tyrell and I did for Image, you're gonna love this Dracula book, and I pitched him on it. I was like, and for those of you who don't know, the book is about in World War II, the British dropped Dracula like a bomb on the Nazis. And then he goes through this whole emotional redemptive journey where he's trying to reclaim his soul and kind of make up for what he did. And that puts him on a head-on path with the Third Reich back in the 1940s. So when we pitched that to him, he loved it. They were developing the IDW Dark line, asked us if we'd like to be a part of that series, and we were like, absolutely, let's do it. And then it's been history ever since.
Excellent. I'll even move to this because the pitch itself, obviously, and I could go to Tyrell on this because the pitch feels like a collision of gothic horror, grindhouse, and pretty much a World War II comic. How did you find the balance between like something pulp fun and having all these emotional stakes while keeping kind of like a grindhouse collision happening?
That's tricky. I mean, for me, like the script that Kenny did was really fun and fast paced, and I think that for me, I focus on sort of moving things forward at all times. You know, we both did, right? Like, so since it was there in the script, I'm like, okay, I got to make this feel like it's constantly moving. And the way that sort of affected the things that you're talking about is that, you know, when you have a premise that kind of keeps the action going at all times,
Yeah.
that kind of keeps it in the fun, grindhouse, like exciting, you know, moment. But then we can have these sort of cutaways where we work in all these other factors, right? These things that feel more like a horror comic, or these things that feel more like, you know, maybe more dramatic scenes like that. I mean, it's a tricky balance, but I think we found it pretty good. I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Kenny?
I think we nailed it. I mean, if you're asking me, so that was always in the back of our heads of like, this has to be a really fun action horror story, a la like Castlevania, Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, and everything, with a little bit of Metal Gear in there with the military stuff. But we were always like, it always has to come back to this emotional journey that he's going on. This bargain that he's made to come back, which I won't spoil for people, but he enters kind of a Faustian bargain. And a lot of that story deals with the unexpected consequences of, yes, he's brought back with his powers, but there's a big, big catch.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of the things that sets him on this mission. So we wanted to make sure there were plenty of dramatic scenes that really showed how this dramatic catch, this Faustian bargain, is affecting him and people that he might have wronged in the past.
Right.
And that was just as much fun to write as all of the crazy, insane action violence that we got to do.
Definitely. Now, how early did the Dracula seeking redemption become the central focus of the story?
Yeah, great question. That was kind of always there. I will admit though, the main crux of the pitch was the visual of of me just pitching Tyrell. I was like, we do a book, and the opening is bomber comes in, drops a bomb. You're like, oh, it's a big metal bomb. You zoom in, it's a coffin. Coffin hits the back of a Nazi train. Dracula comes out.
And I mean, that's very grindhouse too, right? Because it's just like they'll make a trailer for a movie that's not even done yet, and like that's kind of where we were at. But Kenny, I don't know how he found the emotional core, but when he sent me the script, I was like, okay, now I really want to do it.
Yeah. Well, I just started thinking about I've talked about this in a few other interviews. Like, I really love the novel, and there's a part in the novel that a lot of people don't focus on where it's spoiler alert, it's Dracula's big death scene at the end of the novel. He gets beheaded, and Mina Harker, who he's tormented through the whole book and pursued, talks about when his head is separated from his body before he is completely gone, she sees his face become like more human and
Yeah.
content again. And I was like, that is a really interesting thing nobody's played on. And I think we should try to spin out of that. And kind of just like a web of ideas started of, well, if he comes back, what if he has these kind of emotions? What if it's part of this kind of Faustian bargain?
Mhm.
How does that relate to the mission that he goes on? How does that relate to everybody he wronged in the past? What would he do on top of his mission to try to set things right with the world, even though he feels like maybe he can't completely do it?
Yeah.
It brought up a lot of really cool moral questions and philosophical stuff, as well as just great deep character things that was really, like I said, was just as fun as the crazy violence to weave into the story, knowing that that was propelling him forward. Because at the end of the day, action and violent stuff, like, I love it, I've always loved it, but it always means way more when the character is going through something
For
and when it's
sure.
justified. Like, it's just violence if you don't feel for the character, you don't feel like what they're doing is something that you can get behind. You can't be like, fuck yeah, while he's doing it. So that was a
True.
big part of it, and that's kind of how it spun out of that idea.
I mean, even just the concept of the train itself and how it's almost Snowpiercer like, where it
Oh
creates like
yeah.
the setting where it's contained, almost like a video game like progression
Hmm.
through enemies and environments. Even all the way getting down to that chapel scene, which I won't talk about too much because that's a little spoilery. But was the structure inspired by films? Because like when we're talking about the scene, we're basically dropping the coffin
Hmm.
into the train itself. First thing I thought about was Monster Squad.
Yeah,
That's
man.
awesome.
Yeah,
Love Monster Squad.
so Monster Squad basically when Dracula was revealed and you basically see the coffin just basically get dropped into the swamp for the very first time. So that was the first thing that kind of like it etched in my head, but it just dropped into the train, which I thought was even better. But what inspirations basically brought that into mind?
Charlie, you take this one first.
Yeah.
Um, well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things for me. I definitely like reapproached. I looked through a bunch of old movies and games that I like with train scenes, like Uncharted 2 and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome and Snowpiercer. But the other thing that I've always liked is movies and stories where there is that sort of contained situation.
Yeah.
So another big inspiration for me would probably be something like Game of Death, the Bruce Lee movie, where he's sort of fighting through these different levels, and each
Yes.
level is not just a new bad guy, but there's like a new sort of philosophical argument, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of have a similar structure in our book, and so I think our inspiration for that kind of goes probably back to film because I know Kenny's a film guy too. And then it's the same thing with, we both like things like anime, and we like the idea of, like a Dragon Ball scene where there's like a bit of talking beforehand, and also how there's bad guys that have visual flair, but also maybe like a philosophical flair that is at odds with the hero.
Yeah.
And so I tried to do that with the designs too. But yeah, those are some of the kind of starting points for me. And I agree, like things like the raid, stuff
Oh,
like where
yeah.
there's somebody trapped somewhere and they have to fight through. I think that's great setting.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, Kenny, I'll say this. The concept, Dracula fighting Nazis.
Hmm.
Immediately it sounds cinematic, but beneath that, there's a question. What defines evil? How deeply does the series explore morality versus like the monstrosity of it all? It's kind of like the lesser of two evils, but yet this is what we're dealing with.
No, that's a great question. There's a reason the first issue is called Monsters and Devils, because it goes into the philosophical idea of like everyone knows like Dracula's a classic monster, and the Nazis in World War II did absolutely terrible things, unforgivable things, and it really does that lens. I don't want to spoil it because it's one of my favorite scenes that happens of this philosophical debate between him and a soldier
Hmm.
about what's the difference between a monster and what's the difference between a devil. Like
Yeah.
what's evil because of a drive of a hunger, and
Hmm.
what's evil, the evil that men do that's just perpetrated for torture for the sake of doing evil. And so that gets explored differently with each of, for lack of a better term, our bosses, as you
Yeah.
put it, like the video game thing. Like there's a complete one-to-one of like the Metal Gear influence of like a fun group of occult and super science, supernatural villains are on the train that he'll face against, not just physically but philosophically. Each one of them represents a different ideology of the evils that men do in times of war, whether it's
Right.
religion or in the pursuit of science, or just being someone who thirsts on battle, who like absolutely loves warfare. So we're going to explore all those things on top of Dracula going through this emotional state, and that will also weave into the flashbacks of how he got there, his emotional state, and his emotional arc as he progresses through the train. It's a lot of intricate weaving of that. Where I'm a big fan of Mobile Suit Gundam as well, and there's a lot of
Yep.
philosophizing while people are battling because they've got time while they're in the cockpits to shout at each other over the radio.
Yeah.
So we wanted to work a lot of that in.
I'm going
Excellent.
to
Now,
start guessing in all of our future interviews, like how long it'll take before Kenny mentions Gundam.
I
You
mean,
know,
It's always
he's right there.
Yeah. Yes. It only takes a little bit. Yeah.
Now, Tyrell, were there action sequences that became larger, more ambitious once you started drawing them?
yeah, I mean, Kenny has a nice, we have a good way of working where he'll write stuff for the action scenes, but a lot of times he wants me to sort of, do my own thing with them. And so I guess they all grow in the sense that Kenny will say, okay, these characters fight here and these, few little moments have to happen to get us through the story. And then I sort of have to figure out what I want kind of to do there. But it's funny because like I'm working on some thumbnails earlier today, and one of the things that happens a lot is I do get stuck. And as opposed to when I'm working by myself, it's so great I can just go to the script for answers usually, right? And so
Right.
sometimes if I'm stuck on designing an action scene or I want it to have a bigger feeling,
Hmm?
I'm like, well, let's go back to the script again and see like what are they saying here? What's kind of this mean to their character, and how can I make that into the action? So that's sort of the challenge I try to give myself is make it really fun to look at and really amazing to see, but if there can also be little little moments that kind of give you a piece of who the character is, or relates to their struggle, whether it be the staging of which angle they're at, are they big in the frame or small in the frame, those kind of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the one scene in the first issue that sort of kept getting out of hand was just honestly like the introduction of the train. I felt like a lot of pressure to get it like, okay, we're going to see the train, we're going to see the whole train, so people see like this is a big train. And that one was one that I had to finally just be like, okay, I got to stop on this. Like it's just
Yeah.
there's too much. So
Understood. Now, the previews for this hinted at like augmented villains, and a vampire plague. Now, there's a mix in this because there's the bloodletter virus that pretty much is haunting this entire first issue. How much horror science fiction is mixed into the supernatural side of this book?
Yeah. There's a lot. There's at different points in the story, you kind of get different vibes. Like there's a really great scene Tyrell just finished recently that's got way more of like a classic like EC horror comics vibe,
Okay.
with like a really more traditional creepy stalking Dracula moment. But all of the supernatural stuff, like we're also big fans of Hellboy and BPRD, so we love that like that occult part of history where there's rumors that in World War II people tried to use occult or witchcraft sort of things in order to win, and we wanted to take that fun little tidbit and like expand that in our own way. So like in in poetry and like rhyming to Hellboy, but in our own sort of way, like not copying it, being like, what would we do? And a lot of that I think was really cool in research stuff because I know, and Tyrell can speak on this a little bit more. Like the train is based on like prototype blueprints for like war trains and stuff that they either built or had designed, and it's actually built on or built. I'm sorry, it's referring to a real gold train that vanished
Yeah.
at that time. So like that was a little. She was like, "Oh, cool! Like we'll put that in." And all of the villains are based on rumors of things that the Nazis actually developed.
Yeah.
So each one of them is based on a supernatural or super science sort of thing that it was rumored that they were working on. So all of that was really fun to work in, and then kind of add like the injection of pulp storytelling
Right.
Hmm.
to it to pump it up.
Definitely. Now, Tyrell, like, how did you approach pacing in a story that promises nonstop violence, but still needs character moments?
Well, Kenny obviously does a great job of sort of having these interjections into the action. And one of the things that Kenny calls out that I try to make sure I stick to visually is we'll do sort of matched action between those things. And so
Hmm.
you're sort of brought right off of the high of a fight and then into the scene and then snapped back into it via a same sort of a match. And I think that that really helps to kind of keep things feeling smooth. But the other thing is that if I keep my goal is to have each scene feel unique and pull you in. And so even if it's not action, you're still engaged with it, right? Even if it's a scene of people talking, maybe there's like, I'm going to do something cool with the background or add some elements that sort of build a vibe. Because really what I want is a vibe throughout the whole book that shifts, right? So there's an action scene vibe, and we nail that, and then we got to just nail these other scenes vibes, and I think that way people, you know, maybe it's not people getting punched, but everything is so intertwined with the action as far as the story that Kenny did all the heavy lifting there. So I just try to make it look cool.
Right, right. And even I guess in that discussion, because you're discussing somewhat of a classic IP like Dracula, were there any vampire tropes that you intentionally wanted to avoid or maybe reinvent?
That's a good question. I definitely look back at the novel, and it hasn't shown up yet, but we try to use some of the powers and abilities that he uses in the novel that other people don't use a lot.
Hmm.
'Cause people forget he does a lot of crazy shit in the
Yeah,
Yeah.
novel. Like, there's a lot of weird. You're just like, he can do that too. Like, it's like sometimes people complaining about Superman having too many powers. Like, people forget that like Dracula can do a lot of stuff.
hmm,
So that was really fun to go back and do that. And then there were a couple of things that we were like, well, since he's being resurrected, we can play with like his attitude towards stuff. And there wasn't anything we really necessarily avoided. I think we purposefully didn't have like no, we actually there is a part with garlic now that I forgot like that later on. But
Yeah, there's a
it's a
little
very
bit.
quick mention.
Right.
got you.
Right. And then
Yeah,
we
yeah.
don't really have him. He's not like, I mean, this is more, I guess, the movie thing, but he's not like afraid of crosses or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like, they
I
can't just like hold a cross up to him and he won't be like, ah.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
that.
If you
And
read
the
the first,
bloodletter virus thing too, that was purposely designed where like they're not trying to make perfect vampires. They're trying to make a vampire thing that's infectious and decimates a population quickly, like
right,
almost like an addictive sort of thing. That and we see like an example of that of it not working super great and
yeah.
people disintegrating too quickly. So we played with that a bit, but yeah, we keep a lot of the classic stuff. But Tyrell is right. I think the crosses thing is the thing we just don't really explore or play on.
No, for sure. Because for anybody that does read this first issue, there is the scene, and it's like, yeah, it's there.
A lot of crosses. I drew a lot of crosses. Yeah.
For
Yeah,
sure. Dracula's design, of course, feels classic but modernized because there is a time jump that
yeah.
obviously happens from his death, the bargain that's basically made, and in 1945 to where we're presently at in the storyline to where the train exists. How many iterations did you go through before landing on this final version?
Uh, Sometimes character designs are really like super tricky, and sometimes they're just kind of like they're just like there.
Yeah.
And this one came pretty quick for me. I knew I wanted to evoke the cloaks and stuff, but I wanted it to be like leathery, right? And I knew I wanted some red accents,
Yeah.
on there, and I knew I wanted buckles and tactical type things like harnesses and straps and stuff, and the radio. And so it was kind of like I don't think I changed much from the original idea that we put in the pitch pages, other than refining it a little bit more. But yeah, it was like I read the script and I thought about what we were going to be doing, and one of the key things for me when I was designing them was to have these elements that could be sort of flowy and sort of accentuate different actions and stuff. So that's when I was like, I really want him to have like long hair
Mhm.
and a big coat, and also these sort of anchor elements of like the radio and the other tactical things, right? And so it was a really fun one. I feel like he was one of those characters that's, this design has been just sort of, I think, somehow in my brain for a while, and it just, this project came along and it was like, this is for this.
Definitely. Like I felt that as well, because the first time I actually heard him talking on the radio to the captain on the other end, I was like, wait, he's just like with the crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now redemption is a huge theme in the series. Can somebody as historically monstrous as Dracula truly earn redemption, or is the attempt itself the point?
It's more that, first of all, I'm going to apologize because my cat is at my feet meowing if you can hear him, because he wants to play. But uh, to echo him, as like, hi Butters, he's going to walk by the screen in a second. You're
It's
gonna
okay.
see
Look,
Um,
let me tell you, it would not be the first time that a
yeah,
cat has basically gone by the
come here, boy.
screen during one
You
of
can
these
answer it
pods.
with me. Yeah. Say hi, Butters. But yeah, we don't let him get off the hook. This isn't a like he came back and he's all good. Like a lot of this, I don't even know that he's necessarily completely redempted at the end of the story, because we talk about all the horrible things that he's done. I mean, if you read the book, he does horrible stuff.
Right.
Like there's stuff outside of just drinking blood that he does. Like he feeds children to his wives and stuff. It's really bad. And so in this book, we constantly have him being like, at first it's a selfish
Mhm.
mission, and then he slowly starts to realize throughout this story, and you'll see it grow, of like, I don't know that I can ever make up for what I did. It's
Yeah.
like, but I know that this horrible thing is going on right now, and I can stop this. So I'm going to.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't let him off the hook with it, and it's something that he wrestles with the entire book.
Yeah, you almost see that, I guess. In there's this one particular scene where he's first reincarnated, and pretty much he's telling you that he like had to survive off of dead flesh for a good portion of time,
Mhm.
and until he comes into his first feeding of the young woman there with her two children, and that whole scene is kind of like, okay, he's he's almost gaining a little bit of humanity, but just not as much as you would have thought.
Yeah, it's really plays into the whole thing of like, good God, what was I?
Hmm.
Like, I had all this power, and I was this dark thing, and I didn't. I'd become a monster, and I didn't realize it. That
For
like I
sure.
was just driven by
Right.
the hunger.
Right.
Yeah. No, no, go ahead, Tyrell.
I was just gonna. I mean, I agree. I mean, same though. It's like this idea that, I mean, I like that the idea that someone realizes that they've made a mistake and has a genuine change of heart. Like I love to believe that that can happen in real life, and so I like characters that have that. But at the same time, when you've realized you're in the wrong, then there's always this thing with you of you now,
Hmm.
right? And so a lot of the character of Dracula, even just in drawing him, I just always try to keep that in mind, right? That he's, finally he has this, the lightness of having a deeper understanding of what he is and was, but also there's a weight that comes along with now knowing, what you've done.
Yeah. And I feel like I guess that's the aspect I see with the both of you. Obviously, you two have collaborated before in the past with the Schlub, and pretty much does Kenny script panel tightly panel by panel, or does Tyrell get freedom to reinterpret scenes visually?
It's both.
Both,
So
yeah.
yeah, on the Schlub, it was way more Marvel style because we worked with Ryan Stegman.
Yeah.
He was like, it was his baby, and I co-wrote it with him. We worked with Tyrell, but really we all three worked together. And that one was way more Marvel style, where it was like page one, this happens. Here's some dialogue. Page two, this happens, and we would constantly talk to each other about it and change stuff, especially with like the gags and stuff,
Yeah.
with some of the jokes, and then some of the emotional scenes. With this one, it was a mix where the emotional, quieter moments were like page one, panel one, classic sort of full script stuff. The action scenes, like Tyrell had said earlier, I just wanted to let him cook. So that was way more like we did with the Schlub, where it was like page number, and then here's the action in sequence that can happen in some of the dialogue, and I went and added dialogue afterwards. We
Yep.
wanted to make sure that those kinetic parts felt kinetic and didn't feel like just me telling Tyrell what to draw, because I
Mhm.
trust him to draw something awesome when he needs to.
Mm.
Right.
That-
And I also think, just to add to that, that the other nice thing about working with Kenny, and I've had this privilege a couple times, but just like, he's always like, if you want to change it, just let me know and we'll talk about it and we'll change it. Or, and the same thing when I show the thumbnails, if he sees something, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, as long as it's not agreed, something crazy, like, let's change it.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that that's something that, honestly, I don't know how people make good comics without that, honestly, because
absolutely.
it's a medium that's words and pictures, like, constantly juxtaposed, and storytelling isn't just on the drawings, it's in the script, right? And so
Yeah.
if you're not having those discussions, it just feels like, I don't know if you can make great comics that way. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, even in this case, between the both of you, is there a danger in making Dracula too cool? Like, how do you how do you preserve like the horror underneath the charisma? Like, this is a very popular character.
Yeah, that's true. We try to balance it. There's a scene like I talked about that's coming up that's way more like a classic EC horror sort
Mhm.
of thing, where he's in a bind and he does something a little bit more Dracula-ish. That's one of my. I absolutely love it. I would blow it up and make it a poster after Tyrell sent it to me. Um, but it is always important to remember that like he is one of the, if not the classic monster.
Right.
So we still have to show that even though he's on a path to redemption, like this dude's not human.
Yeah.
Which I think you talked about before, Tyrell. That's why you wanted to make him also a little bit taller than normal
Yeah,
to
he,
give him
he,
that
he
like
looks
monster feel.
right. He's taller than most of the people like around him by a good measure, right? Because he shouldn't ever feel completely at home with humans,
Mm.
you know.
Now, also in this aspect, the genre itself, how does horror storytelling in comics allow you to do what film or television can't?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing I love about horror comics is a lot of it has to do with the pacing and with the page turns.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is the building. Like a film takes you there with visuals and music. Like a lot of classic horror moments, if you think back in movies, are the buildup of music, to the reveal and the sting. Like a lot, like there's a classic experiment where if you take the music away, sometimes it becomes less scary,
Hmm.
um, or the stings. With comics, like you don't have that. You only have the visuals. So the pacing and the page turn is the real big thing that you have to sell a horror moment, or even just kind of what you focus on and the quiet versus the loud moments. So to me, like the best horror comics utilize page design as well as page turns. Like it's all in the art and the pacing in terms of how you sell those horrific moments. Aside from just drawing great gore or body horror or just like, moments of dread. Like to me, it always comes back to the design of the page and the page turn.
Mm. Now that
Well, and you
almost
can't rely on a jump scare the way a
No,
movie.
true.
And so the other thing I think it forces is that it has to have stuff that's in the script that's psychologically scary, right? That's the other thing, is that you can't just be like, boo, it has to have like a story that is making you feel on edge or making you feel creeped out, which
yeah,
is what Kenny's bringing to it.
yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of that, I think the modern master of that is Junji Ito, where like he's really great at building dread on a page. Um, Great with like knowing when to do a close up, when to show the body horror stuff. So I did read, I have like almost everything he's released in English, and I did read and flip through a lot of that when we were doing this.
Yeah, yeah, you almost, well, now that you kind of like brought it up, like I almost want to ask, is there like a sonic element to actually like creating something of this of a horror element? Like, what are you listening to? If you're listening to
Oh, good
anything,
question.
is this
Oh,
are you doing this in the
well, I'll
quiet?
go first on this one. I listen to music all the time, and I listen to a lot of metal, and that's not going to surprise a lot of people that know me. And so I listen to a lot of metal while I'm working on this. But I also listened to this I just found this I sent it to Kenny too. I found this guy or band called Hauk, Hauk,
Mhm.
and it's like Russian folk dark synth techno. And it's like that and Typo Negative are probably my soundtrack for this book. So yeah.
That definitely dives into the grindhouse element.
Right. Right.
I opened up my YouTube music to look at what I was listening to, and Hauk is right there because
It
we
was
did it
right
as like a
there.
little music book club thing. So that was a big one, and then also just John Carpenter's music.
Oh
So
yeah, me
his
too.
Lost Themes albums, where it's like
Hmm.
songs that essentially weren't in movies but could have been that he produced. Like I've loved John Carpenter films and his music forever, so that
Yeah.
synthy sort of build of terror and dread was really good for me to get in the headspace. I also put on some soundtracks from Silent Hill and Resident Evil and stuff as well, like some of the classic games. Love to sit down with a cup of coffee early in the morning and throw on the RE2 save room theme to get going on a creepy book.
Yeah, is that the mood ignition? Like when you throw that on, it's like, okay, I'm gung ho to start writing or start drawing.
Yeah, it just gets me in the headspace because like I have a lot of different sort of like albums I go back to for different genres and stuff because
Yeah.
like right now I'm writing like three way different books, like three completely different vibes. So having music gives me kind of like a mental switch
Mhm.
to be able to like shift back into gears of like I need to get into the action horror thing of Dracula. I need to get into the to like the big bombastic action thing of Power Rangers. I need to get into the science fiction thing of Superman. So the with Operation Iron Coffin, the music was definitely a big proponent of how I started my day.
Excellent. I look, I feel as though at this point you guys got to create like a playlist or something like that.
Oh yeah, put
Yeah,
it
maybe
out.
we'll have to.
You
I'll have to
Yeah.
do
might
that.
have to. Now, I'll leave with this. I have some fun questions here.
Sure.
If which horror film would make the best accidental double feature for Operation Iron Coffin?
That's a
Oh,
good
okay.
question.
Yeah. Um, I think, ooh, do I go another vampire movie?
You could.
Uh, I would say I would maybe pair so Midnight Movie, you're seeing Operation Iron Coffin, and then also
2 for 1
From
matinee.
Dusk Till Dawn.
There you go.
That's a good choice.
That's a good choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what that would be mine.
I'm gonna go with a vampire movie too, but one that's totally different. I'm gonna say Life Force. Toby Hooper's
Oh,
Life Force. I would say
love
Iron
Life
Coffin
Force.
and Life Force. That'd be a fun evening.
Mm. Which supporting villain in the series surprised you the most while creating them?
Ooh. There's one in issue 2 that I really like. I don't want to say their name yet, but
Okay.
they ended up being really fun to write. And when I plotted it out, I knew what the conclusion of the face off between the two of them was going to be,
Yeah.
but I didn't know like the actual fight scene and like philosophical fight that they were going to have, and that ended up being really fun and a surprise to me. So the big bad of issue 2 was one of my favorites to kind of weave.
Heard that.
Uh, Honestly, the ones I'm surprised I'm enjoying drawing the most is probably the Hazel and Ivy are aristocrats. For some reason, I'm just like really vibing with their like evil, and
Yeah.
especially some of the stuff I'm drawing now with them is just like they change as the story goes on, and I don't know, they've been really fun, and I didn't expect that. I was expecting to like, I mean, I like drawing all the other villains too, the big guys, and they're
Yeah.
well, you'll see, they're awesome, but like, Hazel and Ivy are just sort of like, there's like a sleek, quiet, cold danger to them, and that's been really fun to figure out.
Excellent. Now, there's been countless Draculas throughout modern history. Is there a favorite one of y'all's?
Ooh, that's
Hmm.
also a good question, and no one's asked me that before.
No one's asked that. I didn't see. I was figuring I was going to
Yeah.
repeat with that one.
No, man, that's right. No one has asked that.
So when I first picture
Hmm.
cinematic Dracula, this probably would have been way different when I was a kid. but now I pictured like the Hammer Christopher Lee version
Okay.
of like the enraged red eyes and stuff. Like that's the one that I picture. Like most people would do Bela Lugosi, but
Right.
I think that's the one that's the cinematic version that pops into my head now that I'm older.
Mm.
Yeah, I think for me, the one that was the first time I actually cared about Dracula and was like, he's cool, is the Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman.
I mean, that's pretty cliche, but it's like, God, it's good. And like, I just remember thinking like, whoa, this is like, it's so much closer to the book. But at the time that I saw that, I hadn't read the book, and I just thought, well, this guy's way cooler than the ones that my dad was showing me that were from the older days. And like the thing about that movie is it shows all the different kind of things he can do and the different ways that he can look,
Yeah.
which is something that we try to do in our book too. So I'm going to go with that one.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. For one, I got to say, I'm glad to have you both here. Glad I got a chance to finally talk about this book. It's absolutely fantastic. The final order cutoff is June 1st.
Yeah.
And of course, this is going to be released with July 8th.
Mhm.
So obviously the fact that we're actually talking about this early, this is great. So we get a chance, of course, to pump up the marketing. Shout out to Greg Katzman.
Yeah, Greg's
Greg's the
great.
best.
Greg does great work. So for everybody here at the Facts Project, I thank you guys both. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, dude, it was a blast. Like, really
Yeah.
appreciate it. Glad you enjoyed the book. And, like, honestly, these were great questions, and it was a really fun way to spend an evening.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So obviously for everybody here, Tyrell Cannon, Kenny Porter, Operation Iron Coffin, as I said, final order cutoff is going to be June 1st, release on July 8th for IDW Dark. Please feel free to get that as soon as it drops, and please get those orders in early. Final order cutoff is a thing. Please get that in as much as possible. So for everybody here at the Facts Project, I'd like to thank you both. We will see you guys next time on the channel. We are out.